Hey, what is going on, everybody out there? This is Jakejames Lugo. Welcome to the channel and welcome to this brand new JJ's One Man Podcast. A lot of stuff to get into today. We got a nice mixed bag of topics and discussions to tackle. We're going to talk a little bit about Starfield and game reviews and the whole discourse that's been going on between the two. We're going to talk a little bit about Star Wars and a little bit about movies. So yeah, nice little cavalcade of stuff to kind of dive into. But anyway, like any episode of the podcast that I post up on here on the channel, make sure you guys leave me a like on this video. Check out the playlist of all the different podcast episodes for JJ's One Man Podcast. There's a lot of discussions, a lot of topics, and a lot of food for thought that I know you guys will love. Make sure you guys check that out on the channel. Also, don't forget, in the description box, there's links to my Discord server. There's links to the TikTok, to my Patreon page. There's a bunch of stuff for you guys to check out. Hopefully you guys like it. Give it a look and see what you guys think about all that. So anyway, let's dive right into this stuff. Let's start off with this Starfield thing, and as well as also the reviews and just a discussion about reviews in general, which I feel like every once in a while we have to have this same discussion because it always comes up in one way or another in relation to larger outlets, to big games that get released. But in this case, we're talking a little bit about Starfield. Now, personally for me, I have Starfield downloaded on my Xbox console. I have it through Game Pass. I'm one of those people that has Game Pass. And this is a very big game for Xbox fans. This is a game that a lot of people have been waiting for a long time. It's by Bethesda. If you love Fallout or any of the Fallout games or anything created by Bethesda that's FPS or RPG-like, you've probably been waiting for this game for quite some time. There's been a lot of chatter about it. And not too long ago, the reviews came out for Starfield. Mostly positive, I will say, which is good. But there were a couple outliers that weren't really outliers, in my opinion. And the weird thing and why it kind of relates into this whole discussion about reviews and what review scores mean and how reviews are done at major outlets is that a lot of people have this very skewed outlook and this skewed perspective on what makes a good game or bad game based on review scores. If you didn't already see it, the review scores for Starfield came out and they were in like the high 80s, I want to say. The most part, a lot of people are giving it like 90s, 80s, and a few 70s. So the ones that were the outliers were the 70 scores, the 3 out of 5s or 3.5 out of 5. The same thing, 70 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 or 70 out of 100, I should say, or 7 out of 10. And a lot of people were really upset about that. And it's always this nonsense with people on social media that are constantly making a big deal out of nothing. Again, making mountains out of molehills for no reason whatsoever. Because as someone who has been writing reviews for a very long time and who has been doing reviews for a variety of outlets on top of my own YouTube channel, I can tell you right now that a 7 out of 10 is not a bad score. 7 out of 10 on the IGN scale is a good game. And for most other outlets that are large, similar to IGN, 7 out of 10 means that the game is good, but has some stuff that's noteworthy, whether it's flaws or things that the reviewer weren't really a fan of. And for whatever reason, this has been a thing for so long that a 7 out of 10 is a bad game. Like, people write it out as like a bad game. And that's a real bad, nasty habit we got to get out of as gamers, as the audience, as consumers. Because for whatever reason, I don't know whether it's like a fanboy thing for specific consoles or specific series or developers, but this just continues to linger around. And it's so stupid because what I saw from a lot of different places, and specifically Twitter or X, for most places, right, where I saw this was like going on, where a lot of people were just talking smack and just being really annoying and just being a real problem over the outlets and the reviewers that were giving Starfield a 7 out of 10. The biggest one that got the most heat, and for obvious reasons, was IGN, which was done by Dan Stapleton, the reviews editor over at IGN. He reviewed Starfield, and he said a lot of good things, and he noted a couple things that weren't working for him, and gave it a 7 out of 10. If you read his review, and you go watch the video review of IGN, it is very reasonable, a lot of his criticisms, and a lot of his outlook on the game. It wasn't written in a way that it deters a lot of people from trying out the game. And I also think that even based on his review and some of the other reviews I saw that were giving it a 7 out of 10, which besides IGN were GameSpot, were Digital Trends, I think PC Gamer or PC Mag also did the same thing. By the way, a lot of people did not have the same energy towards IGN, towards those reviews that pretty much had the exact same score. If you go look on Metacritic, you could see it. But a lot of people were just flipping out over this. And I'm like, he didn't say anything bad or deterred people from trying out the game. Like, he still recommended the game. And by the way, like I was going to say before, a lot of his criticisms are probably going to be addressed in updates and patches. because Starfield's, from my understanding and based on previous history with other Bethesda games, is going to get updated and things are going to get changed over time. It's the same way that I see the same thing with Baldur's Gate 3. When I reviewed Baldur's Gate 3, I didn't roll credits on it like a lot of other people did because that game is massive, but I did play a significant amount of it, and I did have problems with bugs and glitches. And then not even like a week or two later, a lot of those bugs and glitches were getting addressed already in patches and updates. And I feel like that's going to be the same thing with Starfield. There's going to be a lot of different things that get changed up because those games are so massive and there's so much happening in them. There's a lot of things that you probably are not going to see in Starfield through your playthrough. If you play through like 40, 50 hours, there's still stuff you'll probably never reach, if you might be done with the game, compared to people that have put 100, 200 hours into that game. Same thing with Baldur's Gate 3. But my point is that his review was fair. Dan Stapleton's review at IGN was fair, much like the other ones that I saw. I think it's also sometimes we get caught on this hyperbole with a lot of other places, whether it's outlets or just people online on social media that are outright praising a game and completely ignoring things that it should be fairly criticized. In my case, when I gave Baldur's Gate an 8 out of 10, it was because of the bugs and glitches that I saw that were locking up my game, that were forcing me to reload saves or forcing me out of games or crashed or anything of that nature. And it's the same thing sometimes with Starfield, not crashes, but like bugs or other stuff saying that the universe could be a little bit empty at times and things could drag, especially in the beginning. Those are fair criticisms from any outlet or from any person. And people act like it's the end all be all or just flat out ignore that or try to downplay that. And I think that's so stupid because it's intellectually dishonest. Even if you're not a reviewer, if you're not a critic, you could honestly, or at least, there is an element where you have to be honest about something if you see it right in front of your eyes or if people point it out to you, especially if it's so obvious. If there's a bug or a glitch in a game, what are you going to just ignore that? It's not the same as like multiple versions of a game. If there's like one big main version that everybody's playing and there are people that are pointing certain stuff out, it's not like you could just say like, oh, that doesn't exist, because clearly people have been pointing that out. With Dan's review at IGN, and I even saw it in the same thing with, I believe, also the GameSpot review, if I remember correctly, if not the Digital Trends one and PC Mag, where they were just saying like, look, the beginning of the game feels a little bit kind of like, weird and kind of like, little empty and not as exciting at living up to the hype as what people were saying about this game, or at least how it was marketed. It's not till mostly the end game after you finish the main quest, from what a lot of people have been saying in various places outside of those reviews, where Starfield really starts to open up and really starts to become like an awesome, like crazy experience. Again, speaking as someone who hasn't played it yet, I'm only going based off what other people have been saying that have put like 100 plus hours into this game, or at least like 70 plus hours into this game. They're the ones that are saying that. And that's cool. But I think it's also fair to say is like, look, why is it that a game has to really hit its stride after you pass the 50, 60, 70 hour mark? Shouldn't it actually really hit a stride to make me want to spend more time with it at like that first few hours? Within that like 10 or less hour time frame, shouldn't I already be down with this game if I'm already putting in so much time? Because if I'm not and I'm not enjoying it, that should really speak volumes to the experience. And again, everybody's going to feel different about this game. There's a lot of division about it. And it really just shows you that a lot of people come from very different lenses. The other thing, too, that I really want to get into is that, besides like what I mentioned before about the 7 out of 10 reviews, is that this whole idea, if you don't agree with an outlet or a specific review, that automatically the entire outlet or the entire like place where that review comes from is completely, incredible or uncredible, I should say, or they don't have any credibility whatsoever. Like they're completely like just thrown in the trash for some people. A lot of people say that about IGN almost every single time there's a major game that comes out. A lot of the big thing apparently with them is that they're apparently biased against Xbox, which I could tell you firsthand from someone that has written a review for IGN. That is not true whatsoever. If anything, and I keep telling people this all the time, like almost every single year it comes up, that IGN has some of the most strictest and the most like fair and like putting you through the ringer type of criteria when you're writing a review. I can say that from personal experience because I've written a review for them. Dan Stapleton was the reviews editor when I wrote that review for Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm 4. It really like made me try to justify every single point that I was making about this game, which is totally fine, which if anything is great. That's the same thing that everybody's been asking for the longest time. If you really take a look at the IGN handbook and you really look at the criteria for reviews writing over there, and compare it to a lot of other outlets like that, it really makes you start to wonder is like, why is it that some other places don't really kind of, have that type of process to really kind of put their writers through the ringer in order to justify where they stand on a game, especially if they're playing it for a long period of time or if they're playing really popular games that are going to get a lot of attention with their reviews. A lot of that type of stuff I think is very important, and I think it's very, very like key to making sure you have a very concise, very credible, very detailed, very fair review overall. And there's just a lot of other places that I feel like just don't do that. And in reality, it comes down to people that are just upset that certain outlets, especially larger outlets or certain individuals, don't agree with their personal opinion. And that's not really how reviews should be looked at. That's not really how you should be going out and looking for other opinions just for those that agree with you and that you get upset or you rage on social media for over reviews or over critique that isn't in line with your own personal view. That's so stupid. This is why we get into the whole conversation about fanboys and all this other stuff, no matter what console, not just Xbox or Bethesda. I see this all the time with Nintendo fanboys. I see this the same thing with PlayStation fanboys. No matter what platform, PC, you could even throw that in there. This is like a thing that we just, as an industry, as a community, in gaming, we really need to get over, because we're never going to kind of, fully mature if we're just caught up on nonsense like that. And it's always a group of people that just don't care about anything else unless you're saying something that they agree with. And that's stupid. That's really dumb. I also thought it was really stupid that people were going at Dan Stapleton's throat over his views of that game. Like, he had to not only go write his review, right? But he also had to go on social media and tweet by tweet actually make a bullet point argument for his views about this game and why he reviewed it the way he did and gave it that score, which is so unnecessary, which is so stupid. Especially, number one, he doesn't have to justify his views after already writing the actual review that pretty much justified his view on the game. But also, it's like, why do people have to constantly go please like these outliers on social media? These people that are just like trying to take everybody to task over every little thing. And it's not because they're trying to actually contribute to the conversation. It's because they want to discredit other people. And it's because they want to argue and they want people to agree with them and just the hell with everybody else. That is so dumb, so stupid. I think that a lot of times too, we see this and we don't really talk about it as much, is that a lot of YouTubers and a lot of content creators kind of feed into that because it gets a lot of attention, for easy clicks or easy audience, reactions in their favor. And that's a whole nother problem for another discussion. But it's so stupid to me because we're allowed to have discourse. We're allowed to have varying opinions. We're allowed to have different stances on games. What I don't think we should really kind of get indulged in or really kind of caught up too much in is actually trying to make sure that it's either you're with me or against me type of mentality. I think that's so stupid. Just because IGN has a review that you don't agree with doesn't mean that the whole outlet should be demonized. We've kind of been stuck on that for way too long, especially in the content creation space, but really as a greater gaming community, we're just way too caught up on that. We need to get over that. We need to stop that. Doesn't matter if it's Starfield, doesn't matter if it's any Souls game or Star Wars game or a Nintendo game. We really need to stop that just in general on social media. So moving on from that craziness, okay, let's talk a little bit about Star Wars, because this is another one that I'm really confused or shocked about with some of the reactions. Now, if you didn't already know, episode 3 of Ahsoka already premiered on Disney+. It's already out. Tuesday, we're going to get episode 4, which things, for me personally anyway, that I've talked about on social media, Ahsoka is a really good show. I think that Ahsoka is really doing a lot of good stuff for Star Wars, and it's actually exciting and interesting to watch. A lot of people, for whatever reason, don't feel that way, but they don't feel that way not because of what's going on in the show, but because of their personal feelings about Disney and Lucasfilm, which really, it's not so much Disney, it's more Lucasfilm, what they've done with previous projects, and they're not really giving Ahsoka a fair shot. There was this whole discussion on Twitter and a few other places, mostly TikTok as well, about the viewer numbers for Ahsoka, which have been lower than previous Star Wars Disney Plus shows. And a lot of it has nothing to do with the quality of the content in Ahsoka. It has to do with a lot of the backlash from previous Star Wars projects, including The Mandalorian Season 3, including Andor, including the Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi. There's a lot of other stuff that has nothing to do with Ahsoka that people have just been dogging on the show for. And really just taking jabs at it, because from all 3 episodes that I've seen, the show is good. It's got a lot of great stuff going on with its characters, because it's really borrowing a lot of elements from the Rebels show. It's almost like Rebels Season 4, Season 5, like that. as well as also really trying to build out the mythology of Star Wars based on a lot of old classic stuff from George Lucas himself. It's not a lot of Disney stuff that people are always complaining about. It's really going back to the source of a lot of things. Episode 3 has a whole nod to Star Wars Episode 4, New Hope. Like there's that whole sequence there with Ahsoka and Sabine training that is straight up from A New Hope. And then takes it even further by doing some nods to classic samurai films, which is what Star Wars was really based on. The concept of the Jedi and the Force comes from old samurai stuff like, like Zatoichi, which is literally like one of the things that they reference, as well as also like Seven Samurai and the whole idea of the Force based on Bushido, and a lot of other classic samurai film ideologies and philosophy. It's a lot of good stuff that people have been wanting for a long time, especially a lot of hardcore Star Wars fans and faithful over the years. But for whatever reason, there's just this like wave of people that just want Ahsoka to do bad, or just want Ahsoka to be like a garbage show. So they feel like they could get like one jab in at Disney, which again, it's not Disney's fault. A lot of the quality of these different things, especially with Star Wars, it's really Lucasfilm. The reason why I say that now is because I was actually watching an episode, I believe it was The Big Thing, was it Christian Harloff, and he said this, like, look, all the problems that we see in a lot of big projects from like Marvel and Lucasfilm is not because of Disney. Disney, all they do is just give people a check, and they give people a budget, and they tell them to go make this. And the reason why he says that is because he would know. He's spoken to a lot of people. He's been doing this for a very long time. But everybody and their mother wants to blame Disney specifically for these issues. It's really the ire should be going towards places that are actually the companies that are making this stuff. And in this case, for Star Wars, it's Lucasfilm. You could blame Lucasfilm as a company. You could blame Kathleen Kennedy. You could blame the story group, whatever. But specifically, it's Lucasfilm is why certain people have issues with some of these shows. But again, I feel like a lot of the ire right now is still misplaced because Ahsoka is actually good stuff. This is Dave Filoni. This is Jon Favreau. Well, not so much Jon Favreau, but more Dave Filoni with his character that's doing good stuff. So why is it that I'm seeing all these videos of people just taking like pop shot jabs at this show on top of like, making some very unfair criticism, I feel like, towards the show? A lot of the things that I saw were kind of getting thrown around were about, some of the Rosario Dawson acting, as well as also some of the other actresses saying that they were flat. When I watched the show, they were not flat. These are much more like mature characters that have been through a lot over the years from once we last saw them, especially back in Rebels or even the Clone Wars. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened. It's like a 20, 25-year gap with all this stuff that's been going on since before the original trilogy timeline. Like there's been so much stuff that these characters have gone through. So obviously they're going to be more mature. They're going to be a little bit more muted, a little bit much more stoic in some cases, especially with Ahsoka being a Jedi character, which is based on like this like stoicness for the ways of the Force for a lot of the Jedi, how they acted during the Clone Wars. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that shows why this is the way this is. And like people are trying to act like this is just like there just for the sake of being there and no justification for it. And then just like taking these like harsh criticisms of the show. The whole thing with episode 3, even though it was short, and I think it's fair to say that the shorter episodes don't work, that they should be much longer for a lot of these shows, but a lot of stuff in episode 3 was great. Between a lot of the talking moments between Ahsoka and Sabine, between all the action that we saw in there, even the Jedi in space thing with the whole Ahsoka grabbing her lightsabers and getting in space and taking swipes at some of the fighters that were incoming like that. That stuff was really well done and based on a lot of good, successful stuff from the Clone Wars series now being done in live action. Like, what is it that people want at some point? Like, the other thing too, and I forgot to mention this at the beginning, a lot of people want to dunk on Ahsoka as a character, saying that she's another one of those kind of like forced, super powerful, super girl boss type of things from a Disney project, which again is, like we already established, not a fair criticism, but still, this is a character, Ahsoka specifically, that has had a long history with Star Wars now, that has had a lot of progression ever since we first saw her in the first couple of episodes or the movie for the Clone Wars. Now this is a character that has become more beloved and has a rich history and a lot of stuff and seems to be going in an interesting direction right now. And people just want to take a jab at it simply because it's either a female character in Star Wars or it's because they feel like it's getting caught up in these other things, which is not cool. You got to give this show a fair shot. We got to really see Ahsoka for what it is and actually look at what's going on with the story of this show and what it's doing for the franchise as a whole before we really pass judgment on this. I think that people really need to stop, focusing too much on the number of people that are watching this show right now when it's only been like 3 episodes, and really focus on the content of the story that it's actually delivering. It's not the same kind of craziness that we're seeing with House of the Dragon or whatever, but it's still great Star Wars and the same type of vibe that we got from the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. At least for me anyway, from what I've been seeing and what I've been actually talking about with other people. So I'm just disappointed with a lot of the wave of just negativity, but for negativity's sake, from a lot of Star Wars fans and a lot of other people that just want to dunk on this show and want to dunk on everything that's brand new coming from Lucasfilm and Disney, quote unquote. So hopefully you guys check out the next episode of Ahsoka when it comes out next week at the time I'm making this, which will be episode 4. And hopefully we have better discussions about it online, because this show is doing good stuff. This show is actually bringing a lot of great things, and it's actually fun to watch. Unlike what we saw with Andor and unlike what we saw with The Mandalorian Season 3. Very, very different vibe we're getting from this show than what we had from before. Now, a couple other things to talk about too, right before we end this episode. Let's talk a little bit about movies. Okay, we got some movie stuff that's been going on. A lot of things happening with both Marvel and DC, which is, kind of weird, but understandable. And it's not just because of the strikes. I think the strikes going on right now between the SAG-AFTRA and WGA strike, which is still ongoing, by the way. I think that has a big impact on a lot of decision making. But also, I feel like the strikes have been forcing the hands of a lot of people that in positions to actually make decisions at these studios. Number one, there was a lot of delays with Marvel projects. We're getting delays for Echo, delays for Daredevil Born Again. We got a name change and a delay for Agatha. I believe she went from Agatha Coven of Chaos to Agatha the Darkhold Chronicles, which is a totally different, a little bit much more getting into what this actual show might be about, involving dark magic and stuff. But still, there's a lot of delays with that. And then what we have going on now with WB and DC, which is a whole other can of worms. We still got Aquaman 2, which got a little bit delayed, I think. We also have delays for the Batman, which, by the way, for whatever reason, they're starting to get into more of the fantasy elements of the Batman. They're going to have Clayface as the main villain, which I think is a horrible mistake. I think that the Batman, that whole, version of Robert Pattinson Batman, that one should stay grounded in reality with the way that they established it, because I feel like it would worked out so much better instead of having any sort of fantasy elements with that version of Batman. I feel like it's going to look weird and it's going to be a little bit hokey when we see Clayface in there, yet we just had a character like the Riddler, which was based on the killer from Seven, that movie Seven. It would be much more interesting for me personally if we got a different type of villain, if we got Two-Face, or if we got, I'm trying to think, because we have the Joker in there as well, focusing on him, even though we've done the Joker so many times, as well as also maybe because I know they also mentioned that Robin's going to be a part of this, which I'm cool with, but, we're going to get Robin, we're going to get all this other stuff, and then we're going to get Clayface, and I feel like maybe that's the wrong move for that universe, but I digress though. Getting back on focus here, there's a lot of other stuff getting moved around. Dune Part 2 got moved into next year, I believe, which is crazy because that was a big movie that I saw that Warner Brothers was looking forward to. That was actually, they had advertisements that it was coming out, I believe, in November or December. And that's a shame because obviously the reason why they're delaying it is because they need Timothée Chalamet and they need Zendaya in order to actually promote the movie, which makes sense to me, but it sucks because they've already put all this advertisement. At that point, if I was them, even though I know it's the smarter business move to push it back, after all that advertisement and stuff, I would have still held true with that and hope that the strike actually ended. But maybe they see other things right now that we don't see as, the regular public that might indicate that this strike is going to go on for a long time. And for me personally, I feel like all the movies that are going to do mediocre right now is probably going to be a direct result of that. There's other movies that have been coming out that are being kind of meh with some of their releases. Blue Beetle was a big one. And granted, I reviewed Blue Beetle and I didn't think it was as good as many other people have been trying to say it was. And I think it's because of not only just the strike, but also because a lot of the confusion going on with the DC universe. This is another thing too. And I've talked about this already, but I should mention it here too. There's still so much confusion and things that James Gunn needs to clarify with people before we really start getting an idea of what are we doing with the DC universe between the Wonder Woman thing, which we talked about with Gal Gadot, which was another thing that made them look stupid, specifically Gal Gadot and James Gunn and Peter Safran, but also Does Blue Beetle actually start the new DCU, which I don't think it should. I think that was a really stupid thing for James Gunn to say, because he had nothing to do with that actual movie. He had no involvement with it, of the making of it. But also, I feel like he put himself in that position to like have people be set up for disappointment, because we had that movie coming out and we have Aquaman 2 that was coming out. And then Flash was not too long ago. Movies that are really contributing, in my opinion, to a universe that's not going to go anywhere at this point. You know, when he came out and said that they're going to reboot the DC universe, it made those movies obsolete. There's no reason really to go see that movie. And if you see it and a whole bunch of stuff gets promised, there's no reason to believe that it's going to pay off. You know, it was a really stupid move. And then on top of that too, I still think that James Gunn has a really poor handling on social media. He's now the head of DC at this moment. There should be no reason why you're on social media talking to people the way that you're talking, trying to clarify things, trying to interact with people and say a bunch of stuff. Look, even on Threads, I didn't talk about this publicly, but I got an interaction with James Gunn on one of his posts on Threads, where we were talking about, what was it? We were talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. And I came out and said, like, look, like, it kind of sucks that Star-Lord didn't have his helmet on there. What is James Gunn replying to me for? Like, don't get me wrong. I think it's cool that he replied to me, but when you really think about it, he's the head of DC right now. Not only should you not be talking about Marvel, but you shouldn't be on Threads talking to people. You should be out there trying to do your stuff with your universe and try to get things right and try to get this messaging right on what's going on here. Like, what are we doing with the DC universe? That should be your only concern moving forward. Not hanging out with everybody on social media talking stuff, talking smack. Because let's be real here. After that Gal Gadot thing, he was mad quiet about that. When the statement came out from, was it on Variety or the Hollywood Reporter about what Warner Brothers was saying, he was mad quiet about that. So if you really want to talk about something on social media, why don't you go talk about what that was all about? Like what was going on with Gal Gadot and why she came out and said that stuff about Wonder Woman 3. But I digress. My main point is that there's so much goofiness going on with the DC universe and what's going on with Warner Brothers right now in the wake of all this strike stuff, that I feel like they really need to kind of shift things around and reprioritize rather than having stupid stuff like that happen, because it's not doing anybody any favors over at DC. The whole thing with Gal Gadot was stupid enough to really make everybody look stupid, especially James Gunn, but he does himself no favors on social media, you know, especially with how confused and how kind of like, you know, offset a lot of people are about the universe right now. You know, I'm telling you right at the moment, I'm pretty sure that when Aquaman 2 comes out, it's not going to do that good. Like the first Aquaman movie did, like, I think it was like $1 billion. But keep in mind, that was during a time when, one, not a lot of big movies were coming out at that time, I don't think. But also when we weren't told that the DC universe was getting rebooted. That's why people still thought they had to go see Aquaman to find out what was going on with the DCEU. Very different time right now. Are people really going to care about Aquaman from a universe that doesn't exist anymore? On top of that, too, let's not forget that Amber Heard is still in that movie, and a lot of people have a lot of strong feelings about Amber Heard, in the same way that they had a lot of strong feelings about Ezra Miller. So I have a bad feeling about how that movie's going to do, and I have a bad feeling of like what people are going to think once it's out, and what that might actually do with the perception of Superman Legacy, which has a lot of things riding on it. If that movie isn't good, we got a big problem over at DC. So anyway, that's all I got for now. There's a lot of stuff I know that was all over the place between movies, Star Wars, gaming stuff. There's probably going to be even more that happens over the next week. I'm actually going to be very busy over the next upcoming week after Labor Day. I got a lot of stuff I'm going to be doing. If you didn't already know, and I've talked about it on social media, I'm already writing freelance content for .esports. I've been posting up and publishing a lot of different content, including features, articles, listicles, a whole bunch of stuff that you guys could go check out. I've been sharing them over on my Twitter page and other places as well, like Threads and such. Same thing also with TikTok. I've been putting up a lot of TikTok videos. You're probably going to see a couple go up as well later today after I finish recording this podcast. But there's been a lot of things I've been putting out, as well as also a few videos here and there here on the YouTube channel. So a lot of content for you guys to enjoy. Let me know if you guys enjoy all of this in the comment section down below. And don't forget also to suggest other things that you guys want me to tackle as far as like discussions here on this podcast, games you guys want me to take a look at. I'm probably going to do something with Starfield next week, more than likely when I got some time to really sit down and play it. But yeah, a lot of things that I hope you guys enjoy. So that being said, I will talk to all of you again very soon. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.